Welcome to tonight's council meeting. Could we all stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement of country, please? Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we stand upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the culture, tradition, hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. I must inform you that this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at the council meeting, you are respectful to others and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I've received none. Mr. Zachnich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This advice relates to political donations and the requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Act under Section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of Section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. CM4, apologies. I have one from Councillor Cameron. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following recommendation that Council receive, note and accept the apology of Councillor Cameron and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There being no further debate or discussion, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There is no mayoral minute. CM6 action plans, CM 6.1 to 6.4. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you. Happy to move that the following action plans be received and noted. Actions complete for noting only, actions awaiting response from external parties, actions in progress and long-term issues.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, did you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There being no further question or debate, happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting held on the 11th of November 2019. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, 11th November 2019 at 6:15 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Reports from community forums, there are none. Notice of motions, there are none. Presentation deputations, there are none. CM11, reports and minutes of committee and working parties, minutes of the Albury Aquatic Facilities Advisory Committee. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that the minutes recommendations of the Albury Aquatics Facility Advisory Committee meeting held on the 6th November 2019 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
Very briefly, that was the first of the new meetings for the new committee, and I noted that the external members of that committee appreciated the level at which this committee is operating, that it's not a day-to-day operational committee, it is a futuristics aquatics facility committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Doxey. Councillor Doxey?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question to Councillor Glacken. In the absence of Councillor Cameron, I'm sure he would ask the following question. Is there any feeling amongst Wodonga councillors about a representative on the committee?
Councillor Glacken?
I didn't ask the question.
Okay, thank you. Happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 11.2 minutes of Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the minutes and recommendations of the Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on the 6th of November 2019 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Just to note that those present were extremely happy with the rapid progress of the tiered seating that was starting work almost immediately, and very appreciative.
Thank you. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. No documents for sealing. Officers' reports for consideration. 13.1 Development Application 10.2019.36710.1. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A, receive and note the contents of this report, and B, grant development consent to development application 10.2019.36710.1 for a 92-lot subdivision at, it should be at Lot 18, not at of Lot 18 of DP 1057228, and ancillary infrastructure works on Lot 1 on DP 1004069, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included in this report as attachment 6.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Very happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to open debate?
To be honest, I'll reserve my right of reply. Just if I can ask a quick question. I note that the council's response to the provision of open space in this and the previous stage was that there are some identified options, including a land swap for some open space in stage 5 of this subdivision. I just want to make sure that that is locked in rather than when we get to the stage of having to decide on stages 3, 4 and 5 of this particular development, that it seems to disappear. So can we have some advice from staff, relevant staff, around the certainty that some public open space will be provided as part of this overall Englobo development?
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr Mayor. So yes, you are right, Councillor Vanderven, that the applicants in their response indicated that they propose to consider additional open space in a future stage. At this stage, it doesn't form part of this application, and currently, as it is where they proposed on E3 land, it wouldn't be, in our opinion, appropriate to tie it in at this stage. Notwithstanding, as we said, there is the LRP, which is identified at a future stage, which is identified in the Funa-Willinga structure plan on their land, and they have indicated the willingness to provide additional open space over and above the LRP. But at this stage, because it is owned on E3 land, I don't think it would be appropriate for us to require it to be there at this particular point in time.
So just a quick follow-up, Mr Mayor, if I could.
Yeah.
So obviously, taking that answer into consideration, so I can be absolutely certain that when these subsequent stages of this subdivision go ahead, that the council staff will actually take into account the fact that there is a willingness by the proponents to put this public open space into force.
Mr Christie.
Yes, and again, thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Yes, on two aspects. One, there's obviously a clear direction by council to consider provision of additional open space over and above that required in the structure plan. But then also the fact that the applicant here has volunteered that they're happy to consider that. Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I have a speaker against. Councillor Stuttery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I speak against this motion, and I foreshadow an alternative motion should this motion not succeed. And I didn't quite get my finger to the button soon enough, so there you go. Look, I'll answer Councillor Van der Ven's question for him. There's no definite, there's nothing definite when it comes to promises and suggestions, and I think what we need with this particular development is something definite now. I think that this subdivision should be deferred, and there should be meetings between the developer and council staff to get some green space in this particular development. This development, looking at it as it's laid out, it's a square grid. It could have been drawn with a ruler. I probably could have drawn it up myself with absolutely no qualifications. It's dull, it's uninteresting, and it contains 92 or 96 or whatever blocks, and it's solid housing, nothing of interest in it, and certainly no green space in it at all. And this development is a long way from the nearest usable green space for children or even adults who might purchase a block in the development to use. This development needs a green space itself and should not rely on green spaces 800 or 600 or 700 metres away. It certainly shouldn't depend on indicative green spaces, because we all know what happens to indicative green spaces in the Thurgoona-Willinga plan. They seem to just melt away and turn into something smaller and less exciting than originally envisaged. And I don't think that we should rely on the word of a developer that, yeah, maybe he'll put some green space into the next stage of the development. That's not good enough. I want the developer to put some green space into this stage of the development. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions. Councillor Thurley, have a question?
It relates a bit on the same lines. It's about green space or public open space, local recreation park, whatever you want to call it. So the developer's having 92 lots, but he's suggesting to us that the green space should appear sometime in the future on E3 land. How does that work? It's not his land, so he's offering us something that's not even his. Can I get some answer to that?
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. I guess in terms of land tenure, it is on land owned by the person offering it. The zoning obviously doesn't relate to who owns the land, it relates to the permissibilities on it. So the area they've indicated for that they would indicate a future possible park is on land that they do own, but it's obviously on land at the moment that Zone D3 would not be appropriate to use for a purely active recreation space.
Another question, Councillor King.
Mr Mayor, the member of staff, is there some enforceable instrument or document that this developer could sign that would bind him to his commitment for further open space?
Mr Christie.
Again, thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Again, in basis of the fact that it's anything that would fetter council's discretion to consider the potential future rezoning of that land, as indicated to councils earlier, and we've talked about at the pre-meeting briefing session on the 21st of October regarding a review of E3 land. In my opinion, it would not be appropriate for us to say, thou shalt put it on this particular parcel of land. If council does, when it goes into the detail of considering whether this land should be E3 or not, determines that it actually should remain environmental zoned.
Yep. Okay. Speaker 4, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I do speak for this motion and was very happy to second Councillor Van der Ven's motion. We have had a couple of submissions sent into council on this. One was about access to a property that would otherwise be cut off, and that has been met by the developer. Another is about deals with largely about open space. We're aware that from reading the document and the answers provided to previous questions this evening, that the developer acknowledges that they need to provide the open space and will do so in a future part of the development. We also note I noted from my readings of the documentation that the developer isn't required at this point to have open space. Whilst they've acknowledged that they need to have open space in a future part of the development, they don't need to have the space at the moment because of the distances. There's a certain distance that open space needs to be within, and at the moment the developer or this development meets those requirements. Clearly, if we look at plan number 3 of 3 on attachment 1, clearly this space or this development is timely, and because the development directly north, or part of this development directly north of stages 4 and 5, there's been very good uptake. I'm not sure how old these aerial photographs are, but almost half, if not half of those blocks have either been built on or building has been commenced. So clearly there's a requirement for this development to proceed. We as councillors often remind our staff that we need to be the council of red carpet, not red tape, and we've got to take the red tape out of people's way. I'm very conscious that if we hinder development, then developers will take their business elsewhere. There are other local government areas not very far from us, because our local government area is not enormous. So there are local government areas not very far from our area, like right next door or just over the river, who would welcome these developers or this developer to continue development work in their local government areas. So we need to ensure that we get what the people need, get what meets our requirements as AlburyCity, and we also need to ensure that the developer can do what the developer wants to do. If people don't want to buy in those blocks, and Councillor Sashbury referred to the blocks being in rows, etc., and said a number of other things about the development. But if people don't want to buy those blocks, then they won't buy those blocks, and the developer will learn, because the developer doesn't want to have blocks sat on their books. If they make this development, they want to sell those blocks, and if the people don't buy them, then they will learn that that's not what the people want, as we've witnessed in this chamber within the last couple of months, with a developer coming back to us and asking us to review or putting in a submission to change the block sizes because what they had weren't selling. So they redesigned their development based on what the market would take. I do support this development. Clearly, there's been uptake above. It's a timely opportunity for the developer, but it's also a timely opportunity for people within our community to be able to buy that land if they want, if it suits their needs, and to build what they want. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, if this motion is lost, I'll be supporting Councillor Stutchbury's alternate motion.
Point of order, you don't know what Councillor Stutchbury's alternate motion is, so how could she possibly support that?
It was going to be.
I indicated what my alternative motion would be.
Which was?
To defer the development.
Thank you. Thank you. Resolve it.
Firstly, I mean, if what people will buy is the only criteria we should be going by to build future subdivisions for our community, then we should all just go home. We're here because we're trying to make sure that these future developments meet the needs of the future community, and that's the debate that we're having. And with regards to unnecessary red tape, I understand that the developer was sent a letter on the 15th of May that said that amended plans are required to be submitted to show the provision of public open space. So I certainly don't think that it's us at this stage creating any amount of red tape. If the developer had provided provided what they were asked to provide earlier this year, then this would be easy to approve. But I think when they're hesitant to do the right thing, we really need to be enforcing that, and I think deferring it for future discussion is the right thing to do. I think there's some substantial agreement in the room that we want to see public open space provided in the vicinity of this development. But I believe that the only way to get any certainty about that is either for it to be explicitly part of this DA or for us to actually acquire the land for the indicative LRPs in the Saguna-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan. We've had several developments in this term of council that have gone against the Saguna-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan. We're then told it's indicative only and not binding. So I'm not comfortable making a decision based on parks being available on an indicative plan that's not enforceable in future. I would like to see that open space provided in this DA, or I would like to see us acquire the land from the developer so that we can then guarantee that that will be an open space in the next stage of the development. Finally, the attachment 5 that shows a proposal for a park in what's now E3 land also shows a substantial amount of housing on what's now E3 land. So you can forgive me for being hesitant to believe that that's out of the goodwill of the developer that they want to go ahead with that development shown in attachment 5. I think that they can do better. I hope that if we defer it and allow for future discussion, we can get the right outcome and that this would be a really positive development. Thanks.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I suspect, having seen an email that was circulated by Councillor Mack over the weekend, that councillors have made a decision already, but I was encouraged by the reply that I got from Mr Christie, or I saw from Mr Christie, that answered most of the questions that we have concerns about. My major concern is now holding this development application off by at least another 3 months. Another 3 months. I remind that of councillors. There's no reason, because, and Councillor Suchbury mentioned he mentioned 6, 7, 1,000 metres away. The documentation that I've read says 500 metres, and I think there's nothing wrong with kids walking 500 metres. Good exercise. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, you have a question?
Yeah, it's through to the relevant member of staff, please, that I believe will be Mr Zagnich. If the development is deferred and discussions are positive with amendments forthcoming, what's the soonest date that that could be approved by the council?
Mr Zagnich.
It would need to come back to a council meeting, so we have 2 council meetings at this stage left before the end of calendar year 2019, the 9th or the 16th of December. So that's possible. Certainly having discussions today with another developer in that time frame, if they were able to respond in a fairly an efficient manner. So they'd be the next available dates.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Thurley.
Yes, Mr Mayor. It's clear that the developer has gone a long way to addressing the concerns that have been raised with him about a number of matters. But I just think overall we can do better than this. And the biggest issue for me is this matter of public open space. I don't want to argue whether it's 500, 600, 700 or 800 metres. The development behind the Kinross is a beautiful example of a development including open space that was there right at the beginning. In fact, it was there before the subdivision itself was completed. And I think that should serve as a model. In correspondence with Mr Christie, he has said to me that, so this developer is paying developer contributions of approximately $1.6 million, I understand. And if he were to relinquish some of the land for this public open space, there would be some discount on that. Otherwise, council can acquire a certain part of the land. I'm not totally in favour of council doing that on every occasion, but because if developers know that that's what we're going to do, then you're on a hiding to nothing. They will design something with no open space and, hey, wait for the council check or the letter to come. I just think we can do better than this development, and I'm basically saying that we should go back to the developer, indicate the serious concerns that we have, and negotiate a better outcome for all parties. And that includes the people who are going to live there. I myself would not want to live in that context, but if there's public open space and there's room for people to move freely around, and we have bicycle paths and we have proper road networks, then we can make this an area that people will want to live in. And I think that's where we've got to aim more in the future. I'm certainly concerned that a developer can then just put off and say, oh, well, I'll do it on E3 land in the future. That to me, there's no guarantee that even the council will agree that he can do that. So it's not, there is no given about this public open space. So I would, I will definitely vote against this motion as it exists.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There's a question from Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the appropriate member of staff. Under the issues that were addressed by way of public submissions, it says no recreational playground space. As assessed in detail in the body of this report, the Thaguna-Warringah Precinct Structure Plan does not identify this portion of the site as being required to provide any areas of open space. The site is located within 800 metres of a number of identified open space areas, and residents will be able to access these parks once developed. Future stages proposed to the south of Stage 5 and subject to a zone swap as previously discussed, identify an area for the provision of public open space. So I have two questions. Why is the Thaguna-Warringah Precinct Structure Plan not being, if you like, it's something that we've decided on as a council quite some time ago, so we're now taking no notice of it. If the council staff are correct here that says it does not identify this portion of the site as being required to provide any areas of open space, then I'd like to get some explanation about the subject of the zone swap as previously discussed.
Mr Christie.
And thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. So in reference to, I'll take it in two parts obviously, in reference to the first bit asking around this area or portion of the site not identified as requiring open space under the structure plan. So in regards to what this area isn't, there's a portion over on the, get my right directions, western side, up adjacent against the creek where it's identified as LRP 16 or 17, my apologies, I've got the numbers wrong, but identified in my email this morning. And so that's the portion where it was identified for this area to be required provided with open space. In regards to your second question, in regards to why we weren't following that and agreeing that there should be some open space into E3 land, if I've worded the question correctly. As indicated before, council staff hadn't agreed that that was to be provided as part of this application because obviously the E3 land is subject to separate zoning. We just had put forward the position that the applicant had provided in their response, that they've said that in addition to the open space identified as required under the Thaguna-Warringah Precinct Structure Plan, they saw they could provide some additional open space in a later stage of this development, which is subject to that land swap.
Question from Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff. My understanding, my reading of this documentation and the recommendation, the recommendation that came from the staff is that we approve this development based on what it is at the moment. And therefore, it, in essence, meets the requirements of AlburyCity. If we were to not approve this development tonight, then what options does that leave the developer? What can they do? And I'm assuming that one of those options is that they could go and seek, they could go to the Land and Environment Court to seek their ability to proceed with this development. Is that correct? Or are there other options for them?
Mr Christie.
And thank you for the question. For you, Mr Mayor, there are a couple of options before the developer. One, obviously, is they could accept the council's decision and go away and reconsider application and lodge a fresh application. Another option is they could seek a review of council's decision under 8.2 of the Environment Plan Assessment Act, which was, we haven't had one recently, but it was the old Section 82A review, which we've dealt with a few times in the past, in which case they would try to address council's reasons for refusal, but in essence the same application. They can make changes to it to address council's reasons for refusal. And then thirdly, yes, they could decide to appeal council's refusal, and that would be a Land Environment Court action.
Thank you, Mr Christie. There being no further questions or debate, I'm happy to put the motion as division.
Councillor Vandervan has an open debate.
Councillor Vandervan, just to close, sorry.
I do now. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Mayor.
much.
Thank you for the opportunity to have my right of reply. I'm really interested in Councillor Stutchbury's, one of his reasons for refusal is that he reckoned he could design this on a piece of paper with his own pencil. Obviously, if we go back through history with a lot of cities, including even this one, the original design of the city was that it's in grids, in squares, and Melbourne, in fact, if you head in an easterly direction or westerly direction for anywhere in Melbourne, you'll finish up in an east or the west. I mean, it's a grid. The whole city is a grid, and so history abounds with cities that have been built on a grid. Now, it might not be Councillor Stutchbury's preference, but as Councillor Glacken pointed out, it's the buyer who needs to be satisfied about what they're getting, and not if they don't want to buy this place. I'm sure that that they won't. And if the developer has a situation where he can't sell land because the estate hasn't been properly designed, well, I'm sure that in due course he'll come back and say, well, I want to change this, and that's something that Councillor Glacken's already indicated. As far as I'm concerned, the issue around the public open space has been addressed by council staff, and they would, I mean, we go back to square one around development applications. It's all very well to have a situation where you want to defer something to get a better outcome, but to be quite honest, council staff have seen no issues with this. I noticed in the preamble to this, it says the development application was received on the 18th of March. The next paragraph, through a redesign of the layout as a result of a further information request, the number of lots in the subdivision was reduced to 92. I think it was originally a 96 lot subdivision. So they have, as I said, the developer has made a lot of changes as a result of requests from council staff, and also addressed some of the issues around the submissions that were made. So from my perspective, this ticks all the boxes. Yes, I understand the concerns, but I don't feel that the concerns warrant a deferment or a delay in the development process in this particular instance. And I think that the overriding document here has to be the Thurgoona-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan. And if we're not going to take any notice of what it says, well, we may as well go back to square one with it, and provide a lot of uncertainty around people that are already thinking about future developments in the Thurgoona-Willinga area. So I urge my fellow councillors to support this particular proposal and leave it in the hands of what appears to be the goodwill of the developer, as far as the commitment they've already made to future public open space. And I think that having public open space within 900 or 800 metres, and I think it's significant, the proposed areas of public open space that are going to be provided as part of the Thurgoona-Willinga Structure Plan, that within 800 metres of this site, anywhere within this site, that we're going to have some significant public open space and public infrastructure. So, and then it's future councils, when they need to deal with the issue of the further stages, there is already on the record now that we want to make sure that the public open space is provided in the future stages. And I'm sure that the council staff will make sure that that issue is addressed when those further development applications come forward to us. So I think we need to provide some certainty to our people that are prepared to spend a significant amount of money in our community to create these subdivisions. 92 lots, as I said, there's a $1.6 million contribution to future infrastructure. So it's a significant investment by the developer. Yes, he's going to make a profit. That's what it's all about. But I don't think he's flouting any laws. Otherwise, council staff would have refused this, or recommended a refusal for this development. So I urge my fellow councillors to support this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Vandervan, I'm happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Doxey, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Vandervan. Those against? Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King and Councillor Thurley. The motion is lost. And Councillor Stutchbury, you foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that we defer approval of this particular development application until further discussions between staff and the applicant are had to enable identification of a suitable centralised R1 site for a parkland in the existing Stage 4 and 5 development.
That would be it? Yep. Okay. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to open that?
Look, I think we've had most of the debate already. If Councillor,
This one?
yeah, well, actually, I was looking at Councillor Glacken. If Councillor Glacken had her way, then developers could do what they wanted and let the market decide. And if Councillor Vanderven had his way, then if the staff thought it was okay, then it's okay. But realistically, we councillors are here to decide what is okay and what is not okay. And this development, as it currently stands, is not okay, and it needs some green space. Perhaps I was speaking a little glibly when I said I could have designed it myself with a ruler and a bit of paper. I probably couldn't, but it does look a little bland and a little bit too alarmingly regular for my liking. And we councillors are here to make sure that AlburyCity in the future looks the way that we think it would best look for all. I don't really think that I need to go on and on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I have two questions from two councillors before a speaker against. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you. First question to Councillor Stutchbury. So if he gets what he wants out of this particular motion, that is a bit of green space, he's not going to object to the to this development if it still contains the north-south grid lines?
Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Vanderven. Being a left-brained person, I quite like north-south grid lines. Yeah, they have a certain symmetry to them.
Councillor Doxey, question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I still am concerned in relation to now the delay with this DA, and can we get some sort of indication from staff about how quick we can process this? Because I don't want to see it go into next year. It's just not good enough. Thank you.
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, we could contact the applicants first thing in the morning and advise them of Council's resolution. In some ways, we'd be beholden upon how quickly we could organise a meeting and they could come back to us with consideration of some responses, but we could make certain at the very least we consult with them ASAP.
Happy. Councillor Vandervan, another question.
Thank you. A question through you to Councillor Doxey. He did make some comments in the earlier debate around I think he mentioned that he thought that the councillors had already made a decision. Could he point me to the email that he quoted or alluded to in his conversation or his debate earlier, please?
The email was forwarded to all councillors by myself, Councillor Vanderman.
By you?
Yep,
Okay. Thank you. I'll check it out. Thank you.
thank you. Where are we up to? Councillor Glacken wants to speak against.
Thank you. I speak against this because, in essence, the developer can go ahead, can proceed with this development. Other than councillors not liking the development, there is no reason why this developer cannot proceed with this development, because it meets council's requirements. Councillor Stutchbury said that, or referred to comments that I made in the debate for the previous motion regarding this development, and that as long as people buy it, then developers can do whatever they want. The reality is that as a council and as councillors, we need to approve development applications that meet the requirements of our own and the state's development parameters, so the DCP and the LEP. If the development meets those needs, then the developments ought to be able to go ahead, so the DAs ought to be approved. And we as councillors cannot say that we will not approve a development, or we will hold back a development based on some of the aesthetics of it, or based on anything other than planning grounds. So my understanding is that as this meets the planning grounds, then we in essence, or the council has in essence determined for other reasons that it will not be allowed to proceed. And I believe that the developer has good cause to go and seek at a higher level permission to be able to make this development. Even if they were not to do that, I believe that we are sending a signal to developers that we will not approve developments even if they meet our planning requirements, our own planning requirements that Councillor Van der Ven has also referred to this evening. So I will not support, unless someone again pulls a rabbit out of a hat, I cannot support this alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Con, Speaker 4.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with Councillor Glacken that we should be enforcing our own rules. On the 15th of May, the developer was asked to submit amended plans showing the provision of public open space that was to be at least 4,000 square metres inside, fronting onto Kerr Road and including local play space, which caters for a range of age groups. They were asked to make a number of other amendments too, and some of those they've made to their credit, but we can't insist that amendments be made, have half of them be made and then say, oh, good enough. We asked them to provide open space. They've failed to do that. I think it sends a very important message to future developers that this is the quality of development that we insist on having. And if we're willing to approve things anyway, despite asking for things to be done, then it leaves a lot of wiggle room for future developers to try and profit from every single block without meeting the requirements that we've asked them to do. Councillor Stutchbury's motion is not rejecting the refusal, is not refusing the application, which I agree could lead to a court case. It's simply deferring it and asking the applicants to meet the requirements that we gave them back in May. Unfortunately, in my opinion, that delay is not our fault. That delay is on the developer for not doing what they were asked to do in May.
I have two questions and more speakers for Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you, through you to the relevant member of staff. So can I get a full list of the requirements that the developer was asked to address in that letter in May? And secondly, can I then get an idea of which ones they exceeded to? And thirdly, if they didn't exceed to any, why then did the council staff recommend that this development application go ahead?
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question and for you, Mr Mayor. So the full list of issues that the council staff requested the developer to address are included in response form in, I think it's attachment 4, which is the response from Blueprint Planning, but I'm happy to speak to them, obviously. I won't read them word for word because maybe here all night if council's happy for me to abridge it. But in essence, one, we wanted them to identify works which may be outside the development site. So there were some works on the adjoining property which is owned by a related party and we've got owner's consent for that. Second was in regards to lot configuration. So there were concerns raised around the fact that a number of the lots backed onto the environmental lands, and we have a preference to have road frontage onto environmental lands in regards to public access, in regards to surveillance, etc., and a variety of other issues. Thirdly was around open space, and the concern raised that there was a non-provision of open space, and we did make a suggestion as to how we believe that open space could have been provided. Just going over the page. There was some identification that they did have some works in E3 land and they needed to have an assessment of those E3 land to see if there were some impacts. We did ask for a landscape plan to identify what works they were going to be doing now and how they may augment some of their works. And then finally we did request a copy of a tree report identifying the trees on site, their health, their condition, and therefore justification why they're required to be removed. So they were the matters identified in council's letter. In regards to those matters, obviously as we do when we require and we assess an application, we do identify a number of issues where we as staff will identify where we believe improvements can be made. In essence though, an application is the onus and the responsibility of the applicant and council's decision to make on what they've asked us to do. We can make a number of suggestions and we do that quite frequently on applications. The applicant has the ability to either make changes in response to those or say, no, I don't wish to make any further changes or a combination thereof, and I wish council determine that application. At that point in time is when as staff we sit down, we determine what is the best overall outcome. Is this an application that, in our planning expertise, for a better word to describe ourselves as we're employed as planners by council, whether we believe the application satisfies council's requirements and objectives as outlined in our policies such as Figuna Precinct Structure Plan, the Albury Development Control Plan, LEP and other documents, and whether overall the application may be therefore worthy of support. It doesn't mean that there may not be portions of the application that we don't believe could do with some improvement, but obviously we've been asked by the applicant to decide on what's in front of us, which we have a responsibility under Act to then decide if they decide not to make any further changes. So hopefully that answered your question, Councillor van der Ven.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yep.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on the basis of the answer and they've decided that the no provision of public open space wasn't a serious enough, if you like, omission to preclude this development application coming before council with their recommendation.
Mr Christie?
You probably summarised what I took 5 minutes to say, Councillor van der Ven, but yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is to Mr Christie, and just following on what Councillor van der Ven was saying, and referring to the comments that Councillor Con made in relation to 15 May, in relation to the open space. The words you chose to use are, you suggested to the developer could. There was no direction to the developer that had to put in open space. That's my question. Thank you.
Mr Christie?
Thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Our precise words are, and they probably are more along the lines of what Councillor Con said, which is amended plans are required to be submitted to show the provision of public open space. So as staff, what we tried to do is provide a clear direction of where we believe improvements should have been made and could have been made. But as indicated in the end, if the applicant decides not to make those changes, then we have to make a recommendation based on the overall application, not on the fact they didn't comply with a portion of a letter.
Okay, do we have a speaker against or do we have a speaker for a moment ago? I've lost track of this. Councillor Van der Ven speaking against.
Look, on the basis of the comments that I've already made, I'd like to obviously vote against this for all of the debate that we've had previous to the previous motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for?
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I fully appreciate that we have qualified planning staff and they do a brilliant job. But the first thing, planning is not black letter law. It's subject to interpretation, and Mr Christie has said that on numerous occasions. If it was simply a matter of the staff writing a report and we just nod and say yes, what's the point? The point is that we're here to make decisions and we're required to as part of being a councillor. I remember 2 applications. There was one in Mount Street where the council voted against the recommendation to approve a development in Mount Street. That applicant sought a review of our decision, but that matter has not proceeded any further than that. The review was carried out, but the decision of council was to stay with our initial decision. I remember a decision about a radio antenna on Forest Hill. The council on that occasion, the staff recommended that we not approve it, and we voted against that and did approve it. So it's not black letter law. If all we're here to do is to say, oh, I've read the council report, it says we recommend approval, then there's not much point in coming. There's not much point in me reading however many pages of that report and however many attachments there were quite a few. There's no point. I might as well just say, oh, well, that's what the planners have said, so when it comes time, I'll just say yes. We are looking for better development here, and I believe that we can ask the developer to consider our stance and to decide. He can still decide not to. We've already seen that. He can ask for a review of our decision, and then he can eventually go to the Land Environment Court. It's not where we want things to end up all the time, but we do want high quality, good development. And asking questions and not just rubber stamping stuff is part of our job. So, thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak against the motion. I enjoyed the words that Councillor Thurley said, and I support what he was saying because he has a lot of passion for this. And I remember the antenna one quite clearly. The vote of 9 councillors was 8 and 1 was for the motion to support the staff. And we know who the supporter of the staff was, and that's fine because on occasion we need to support the staff. I am concerned still in this particular motion that we tell the developer these are the rules. The developer steps up to the plate and we say, well, hang on, we've just changed the rules because we don't like them. I'm not sure if that's going to resonate with too many people, but that's the way I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm supporting this application, this motion from Councillor Stutchbury. I think what Councillor Stutchbury was getting at is that it's to go back to the developer. It's to put to him what the council has said in debate. There was certainly a suggestion, a hint, however Mr Christie wants to put it, to say that that you should really consider having open space in this, and he's chosen not to do it. And in 1 minute, we'll find out whether that's backfired upon them. So, and this is also why we have 2 council meetings a month and not 1. So Mr Christie has indicated that he's going to give the developer a call tomorrow, and probably there will be a meeting tomorrow afternoon. I encourage Mr Christie to keep us updated with emails, and potentially it could come back to us in 2 weeks' time or 4 weeks with whatever has come out of those meetings. So it's not a total no, and I think that's the spirit in which Councillor Stutchbury has put this motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor King. No more speakers for or against. Given that my name has been mentioned a couple of times in relation to this matter, I did circulate a email to all councillors as part of a transparent process on this issue. This issue was previously spoken about in this chamber, and a discussion of open space was posed. The Thaguna-Warringah plan does create and does talk about open space. As this councillor group will know, in Diamond Drive, we fought for open space in Diamond Drive. We did not allow that developer to develop that space without adequate open space for people to congregate. The issue with this particular development is the open space, is the lack of parkland. And the issue that I see personally is that the developer's asking us again to set aside E3 land and reclassify it R1 land, so he can then, or he or she can provide open space that we requested. Now that's a further trade-off to the environment and further trade-off for us to consider. I think the issue for me in this particular issue is Kerr Road is a family lifestyle alternative at this point. Thaguna-Warringah is a family lifestyle alternative, and we are asking developers, as we did in Brooklyn Fields, to provide open space in their developments. We need to provide a consistent approach, as we did in Diamond Drive. We need to be consistent in our approach that the green fields of Thaguna are certainly protected and the species in the fauna and flora are protected. We shouldn't be having to trade off for our E3 land that we had zoned many years ago for R1 land or other open space land, so this developer can then say, well, that's where I'll put a park. Because to me, A, that park is then too far away. The developer has put in 1 and 2 without any open space and relied upon E3 land at the rear of the development and a golf course to offset the need for open space. But if I've got young children and I've got a family, I would like to be able to have access to a park within reasonable walking distance. Now, 500 metres or 600 metres, 800 metres, the terrain in that particular location for a young child is quite substantial. There's a lot of hills in that particular location. So I would think that we as councillors are being responsible, are providing what is within the planning instrument a way forward for this developer to consider, at our request, to allocate open space within the development, which will then cater for the development of the Thaguna-Warringah corridor. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to close debate?
No, I think it's all been said.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour by division, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King, Councillor Thurley. Those against, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Vanderven. The motion is carried. 13.2, Twin Crescent Drain Construction, contract number 19/04698. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the council accepts the tender from Abbott Constructions Proprietary Limited for contract number 19/04698, Twin Crescent Drain Construction, in the lump sum of $126,110.74, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Very happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to open debate on that?
There's little to say here. It's a local company. It's under budget, and yeah, all the numbers look good. So no reason to go on about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.3, the September quarter budget review. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Got the bad one here, didn't I? Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and adopt the revised budget estimates for the 2019-20 financial year. B, note the supplementary reports including the consultancy and legal expenditure and contract expenditure listing. C, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to make application to the New South Wales Treasury Corporation for the budgeted credit foncier loan funding of up to $16.7 million. D, further assess the required amount of loan funding to be drawn down by 30 June 2020 as part of the March quarter budget review. And E, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to approve the fixed interest rate period that represents best value for money.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
I'm very happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate on that?
No, I'm happy to let the report go as it stands.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We're up to the Albury City Annual Report. Is that it? No. Monthly Development Statistics, 14.1. Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendations of the motion the council receive and note the information in the Monthly Development Statistics Report for October 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you. Happy to second that.
Councillor Vandervan, just to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Now we're up to 14.2, the 18-19 Albury City Annual Report. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the council receive and note the 2018-19 Albury City Annual Report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that.
I'd just like to briefly note that the members of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee at the meeting last week were very complimentary of the report, and I too am very complimentary of the staff for producing this very high quality report.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.3, the Delivery Program Quarterly Progress Report, September 2019. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you. I move that council receive and note the Delivery Program Quarterly Progress Report for September 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.4, the 2019-20 Works Program Status Report, September quarter. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council receive and note the status of the 2019-2020 Works Program as at 30 September 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that?
Thank you.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. We're up to the investment balances for October 2019. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation as a motion that council receive and note the investment balances report for the month of October 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second that.
Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.6, the Corporate Health Indicator, September 2019. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you. I'd move that council receive and note the September 2019 Corporate Health Indicators Report.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that.
I just have one question. It was raised in the ARIC, the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting the other day. I note that under one part of the report, there were 4 terminations due to misconduct. Can the CEO advise us what has occurred and what the council action is?
Thank you. Mr Zachnich, sorry.
Thanks for the question through you, Mr Mayor. So probably not in a public forum to the extent. I'm happy to deal with that with you one-on-one later, but essentially they were disciplinary matters in terms of either the council's code of conduct and or related matters.
Councillor Thurley.
Just to follow up, I wasn't asking for any detail, except that are these matters required to be reported to ICAC?
A couple of them were, yes. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Okay. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports for noting. Urgent business. Councillor Con, you have an item.
Yes, thank you. Hoping to present council with this token of appreciation from the Albury-Wodonga Sikh organisation. I had the pleasure of attending their celebrations for the 550th birthday of their guru Nanak, which was a truly enormous festivity for that group in our community. I also attended the Albury-Wodonga Punjabi Cultural and Sports Association Sporting Day, which was very well attended, and they were hoping I could pass on their appreciation for the support of Albury City.
Thank you. Very nice. Councillor King, you have your button.
I just have a matter to the relevant member of staff. I've noticed that the freeway has been mowed down the middle to reduce the fire hazard, but it's looking a bit like male pattern balding. The batters on the side are still 2 metres high, and can you give me an update of where we're going to deal with that?
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So we've met with RMS last week and had a number of discussions, and they're looking to come down either late this week or early next week. We're working through a whole range of options moving forward as per the council resolution, and hopefully in December I'll be able to, through a workshop, give you some more details on them as we work through it. Last week I did email back to RMS and thanked them for doing the slashing and asked them to pay some attention to the batters, etc., which Councillor King's mentioned now. And they said they'd have a look at it and get back to me, but I haven't got an update as yet.
Just as a follow-up, so we're having a workshop on that on the next workshop or pre-briefing meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I just wanted to raise a matter. I attended a Board of Trust function on Saturday night, one of their on-the-couch functions, and this was the launch of a documentary film, Solstice, made by Helen Newman of Nomad Films. This documentary starts with the story of the Baker family and the loss of their daughter, and it's a powerful and very hard-hitting documentary film. Stuart Baker and Professor McGorry also attended, and it was a very full audience. The point that I wanted to bring up was that the Baker family have launched the Solstice here in Albury, and it's gained a lot of momentum, and I understand it's now, last time it was live streamed to Benalla. This film offers us the opportunity, and this city the opportunity, to become leaders in doing something about mental ill health. The Bakers have been to a function in London, and it's quite clear from what Professor McGorry said. He said politicians would not be able to neglect cancer the way they neglect mental health because the public would rise up. The missing ingredient in mental health is the people's voice. And this council and this community has a great opportunity to do something. I understand from Helen Newman of Nomad Films that she would require about $120,000 to bring this film to an international standard documentary. And I believe by raising our voice here and by contacting our federal and state member, and perhaps even a shout out to most service clubs, that we can be the leaders in getting this film up to the standard required. It's a brilliant, gut-wrenching film already, but the filmmaker herself is a bit of a perfectionist, and she wants to see it in a much better state before it gets launched nationwide and eventually to the world. So I commend the function that was held the other night and the film itself. You can find it, and there is a website called solsticefilm.org, and there's also a place where you can donate, documentaryaustralia.com.au/project/solstice. I think that this is a great opportunity for our community to take a big lead in what is a very, very difficult issue, poorly researched, poorly funded, and we need to do something, and we can do it.
Thank you. There are no other items, so we have a confidential matter. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. I move that council move into confidential to discuss item CM 17.1, sale of land to recover unpaid rates and charges, as this is a confidential item exclusive of press or public on the grounds that 2, the matters and information are the following: A, personal matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors, Local Government Act 1993, number section 10A2A. Thank you.
I would like to say that, but I have a question.
Councillor Clacker.
Is it personnel matters?
No, it's not. It's just item B.
Item B is the second part.
Yeah, we've got the wrong part up there.
Just item B, sorry.
Yeah, there's item B, Councillor Thurley, the personal hardship of any resident or ratepayer. It
I'm
hasn't
just
been
reading
brought
what's
out.
up there.
We're just reading off.
Okay, so you seconded that, councillor Glacken?
I'm very happy to second the personal hardships of any resident or ratepayer. Personal hardships. Thank you.
Councillor Thurley? Yep,
fine.
okay. So are there any people in the audience who wish to raise any issues that might be here for the public forum? Would appear not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. A mover for the motion. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, councillors. We're back in open council, and I will confirm the motion that was put in confidential. It was moved by Councillor Vanderven, seconded by Councillor Thurley, that Council A receive and note this report. B, resolved to sell the following properties in accordance with its power under Local Government Act 1993 for unpaid rates and charges. 1, Lot 49 DP 28792. 2, Lot 32 DP 38111. C, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to 1, appoint a real estate agent by such method that the Chief Executive Officer deems necessary. 2, instruct council solicitors to prepare a contract for sale for each property. 3, determine whether any arrangement other than full payment of the outstanding rates or charges will be sufficient to cancel the scheduled public auction. 4, fix the date, time and location of the public auction. 5, determine the reserve price for each property. And 6, execute the contract for each property in the event of sale. And D, hereby authorise the council seal to be fixed the contract for each property in the event of sale in the presence of 2 signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Legal Document Management Procedure. That motion was put and carried. That completes our business for this evening. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff.